Who are the Mythbusters? Adam Savage, Jamie Hyman. They don't just tell the myths, they put them to the test. This episode, shooting down paintball legend. Can what gas you use in your gun really affect how well you play?
So Adam, what's our next myth?
So our next myth is about paintball.
Oh, that's very interesting. You think you could elaborate a little bit?
Well, people say that you can change the speed and accuracy of your shooting by changing what gas you use in your gun. They say that compressed air will give you more accurate and reliable shots, while CO2 gives you faster shots.
Well, what about nitrogen? I mean, I've heard that people use that in their paintball guns as well.
Well, actually they're just the same thing. Since compressed air is made mostly up of nitrogen, some people prefer to call it nitrogen.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I also want to test how different gases react in different circumstances.
Yeah, and I'd also like to know how the number of particles and the pressure affect our testing.
Well, I would assume that more pressure would result in higher velocity shots.
That sounds like a good assumption, but we should probably consult an expert and get their input before we start any experiments.
Now go make me a sandwich.
First, the team goes to UC Davis to consult an expert on the science behind the myth.
How are you guys today?
Good, how are you?
Doing great.
So have you heard of the myth we're doing?
No, I have not.
Okay.
So we're testing the differences between using nitrogen, or compressed air, and using CO2 in paintballing. So what is your opinion? Do you think that there's going to be a big difference, or do you think that they're going to be about the same?
It's really hard to tell. To me, the biggest difference would be in the pressure that you can get, and I would guess that you can get similar pressures with all of them, but I'm not sure.
So like assuming they're at the same pressure, do you think that they're really going to make a big difference?
Well, the differences in the molecules are, you have carbon, which is a molecular weight of 12, nitrogen is 14, oxygen is 16, right? So when you put them together, you have CO2, which is a pretty big molecule, carbon plus 2 oxygens, so its molecular weight is going to be quite a bit bigger than nitrogen, which is molecular weight of 28, right? And air is going to be a mixture of all of them. So if you're thinking about things like how fast do molecules travel in those different gases, then you have to think about diffusion and processes like that, and the bigger molecules will diffuse much more slowly. But again, under pressure conditions like yours, I'm not sure that you'll see that much difference, even though there is quite a bit of a difference in the molecular size and the range of sizes that you have.
Okay, well thanks for talking with us today.
Yep.
With knowledge about the science behind the myth, the team now heads to Davis Paintball, where they'll consult experts and try out the myth for themselves.
I'm a rep here at Davis Paintball. I've been working here about 4 years. So basically you're asking me about CO2 versus nitrogen in terms of paintball guns. Personally, I'm a big fan of nitrogen. I think compressed air is definitely the way to go. It runs cleaner through the guns. There's no conversion that's involved. The problem with CO2 is the fact that it turns into a liquid. We put it into the cylinders as a liquid, and then it needs to convert itself through the regulator that we have on the CO2 tanks into a vapor state. With compressed air, it goes in as a vapor state and it leaves the gun in a vapor state. And the only thing that the regulator needs to worry about is regulating the pressure that it leaves the tank from and into the gun. So it seems like it's a cleaner process. It's also a lot cheaper because you don't have to have another company bringing in CO2 tanks that we use to refill all the CO2 tanks off of, and we just run our own compressor, and the only thing that really hurts us cost-wise, it ends up being gas. Anything else besides that?
Okay, one more thing. Why would you use CO2 then? Is there some kind of advantage that people think?
CO2 is before, let me go ahead and go back. Usually, all right, the thing with CO2 that was the advantage previous to compressed air was that it was easy to take it and use it as a propellant for the paintball guns. Before you could compress down tanks to the size that they are now. So they used to be that compressed air tanks needed to be so big in order to get pressure inside of them that would actually propel a paintball that it became burdensome for the players to use. So it went from 88 cubic inches and larger than that to now they're down to 45, which is significantly smaller. You're talking about half the weight, half the just mass area that you're carrying around. So basically, like, the technology's gotten better that you can make a cylinder withstand 4,500 psi at a much smaller module than compared to like the CO2 tanks, which even like weigh more, they cost more. It was cheaper at the time, but now that the technology's kind of caught up with paintball, it's gotten significantly better.
Okay, thank you for your
Yep.
time. The first step to testing any myth is getting the materials. The team must get CO2 and nitrogen for their guns. First, they get CO2, which is dispensed from a tank. Because of the rapid depressurization, it's very cold. The compressed air, however, is a self-serve station. Now, the team heads into paintball. First step, chrono station. Here, they'll test their guns to make sure that they're within the speed limits set by the court. Also, we're going to take this time to test our guns and see if we can find a difference between CO2 and nitrogen. After testing the guns, the team now wants to try them on the field and see if they can determine any difference. Alright, well, I'm glad we're off the field now.
Alright, let's go back to the lab and look at our data.
So what do you have here?
Well, here's all our math for everything that we've done so far. So as you can see, we can use the ideal gas equation, or PV equals nRT, which is basically just pressure times volume equals the number of particles times the temperature times R. And R is just some constant that kind of balances the whole equation, makes everything work, makes all the units work out. And so we applied that to nitrogen, and the pressure, as you can see, was 3,000 psi, which we had to convert to 204 atmospheres. The volume was 48 cubic inches, which we converted to 0.78 liters. And the constant we used was 0.082. The temperature was 25 degrees Celsius, which we had to convert to 298 degrees Kelvin. And so when we plugged all these variables into the equation, we got 6.57 moles in the whole canister event. And as for CO2, it's actually much simpler. All you have to do is divide the total mass of the canister by the mass per mole of CO2, and we ended up getting 11.34 moles per can.
Okay, so what do you think about the myth?
So overall, I don't really think we noticed a significant difference between the two gases.
I couldn't agree more. It seems like we couldn't determine how either of the gases affect the gun's speed and accuracy.
Let's start with speed first. The gun really never fired consistently. I mean, sometimes like the difference between two shots would be as many as 100 feet per second, which is pretty ridiculous. I mean, our main goal was to figure out which gas would produce higher velocity shots, but due to the inconsistency of the shots, I don't really believe that we can determine which gas actually made the paintballs travel faster.
Well, anyways, I couldn't detect any differences between the two gases and how they affected speed.
I wasn't able to tell. As far as I could see, I was able to hit my targets with CO2 just as easily as I was with compressed air. Besides, when you have a paintball gun in your hands, you can't really rely on accuracy anyway. I mean, there aren't any sights, so you basically have to place your shots based on where your previous ones were hit.
Yeah, so I don't think that our results gave us any strong indication that one gas was better than the other. The original myth stated that compressed air would give you more accurate shots while CO2 would give you faster shots. However, we weren't able to prove or disprove either of these. So sadly, I'm gonna have to call this one plausible.
All right, plausible it is.